Cell is one of the most terrifying creatures in the Dragon Ball franchise, designed from the genetic material of some of the most dangerous beings in all of existence. He carried within him the DNA of Frieza, whose raw might was enough to annihilate the Saiyan race; Vegeta, a prodigy born with incredible battle instincts; Piccolo, a super Namekian who could stand toe-to-toe with the androids; and even Goku, the legendary Super Saiyan whose potential had already shaken the cosmos. On paper, Cell was engineered to be the ultimate life form, but just how powerful was he really during his rise? Is the fan claim of him being a solar system buster accurate, or is his power extending even further? When Cell first revealed himself in Gingertown, his target was Piccolo, fresh off fusing with Kami. At this point, Piccolo had reached a level comparable to the androids, enough to rival Android 17 in direct combat. Their fight was brief, but it's important. Cell was able to exchange blows and withstand attacks from Piccolo, even if he wasn't quite on the level. Some fans argue that Piccolo was holding back, but that's flat out contradicted by multiple sources. Piccolo himself stated that he was fighting seriously, and guidebooks reaffirmed it. Even Android 16 acknowledged Piccolo's strength as rivaling 17. So the conclusion is simple. Piccolo was at full strength, meaning Cell was already brushing close to the same tier, just short of matching 17. If you were to place Cell precisely, the best comparison at this stage would possibly be Android 18. She was confirmed weaker than 17, but still extremely dangerous. And that lines up with where Cell sat during his early battles. Now, when Vegeta entered the picture, Cell actually chose not to fight him. Some misinterpret that as Cell admitting inferiority, but the circumstances tell a different story. Cell had just barely escaped Piccolo and was trying not to draw attention to himself. Besides that, the scaling doesn't add up. Cell was relative to 18, who dominated Vegeta. Logically, that would mean that Cell should still be above Super Saiyan Vegeta, despite what his cautious retreat might suggest. It's when Cell absorbs a massive number of humans that his power jumps dramatically. After feeding on countless victims, he returns to confront Piccolo during the latter's fight with Android 17. At this point, Cell tanks Piccolo's light grenade head-on without sustaining so much as a scratch. The Daizenshu explains that if a fighter's ki is at least double their opponent's, their attacks can be nullified. That means that Cell's strength skyrocketed to more than twice Piccolo's after his feast, showing just how absurd his exponential growth really was. And while it might sound odd that draining ordinary humans could cause that kind of a leap, Dragon Ball has consistently shown that absorbing or borrowing ki leads to boosts far beyond simple additive increases. It compounds in staggering ways. After Cell disposes of Piccolo in 17, his next major clash is with Android 16. The two end up going strike for strike, and most sources agree that they were close to equals. Still, there's a case to be made that Cell had the edge. For one, Dr. Gero himself described 16 as the mightiest of his creations, yet Cell was hanging with him while already draining stamina through a tail. A technique we know weakens his opponents based on what it did to Nail and Piccolo earlier by using regeneration. If you want to argue parity, fair enough, but the evidence leans in Cell's favor. Once he absorbs 17, Cell evolves into the bulkier, semi-perfect stage. This transformation is tricky because there aren't many direct statements comparing it to his base form. The consensus is simply he got a massive upgrade, but let's actually break it down. We know suppressed semi-perfect Cell endured hits from 16, someone who previously fought him evenly, which means his base durability jumped at least twice-fold right off the bat, and that's only the baseline. By the time he's trading blows with Vegeta, we see him powering up multiple times, making a conservative estimate of more to a 3 times boost or even higher. Another method of scaling is comparing this jump to the one he later receives from absorbing 18. When Cell becomes perfect, he utterly dwarfs Grade 3 Trunks, even though Grade 3 was 10 times stronger than Grade 2, the same Grade 2 who handled semi-perfect Cell. That suggests that the 17 semi-perfect boost could also be close to that magnitude, if not higher, since 17 was a stronger android in the first place. At minimum, we're looking at a doubling of strength, but realistically something close to a 10 times increase. Regardless, semi-perfect Cell doesn't have many other feats before upgrading again. Absorbing 18 finally completes its design, giving us the perfect Cell we all know. Immediately, he demonstrates the gulf between himself and the Z fighters. Krillin, Trunks land clean attacks that do absolutely nothing. Even the Destructo Disc, a move capable of slicing opponents well beyond Krillin's level as it did with Frieza, barely scuffs Cell's neck. In return, he floors Krillin with what he calls a tap and mocks Vegeta by taking one of his vital strikes without even flinching. Things escalate further when Vegeta launches his final flash. Cell, caught by surprise, still reacts in time to maneuver so only part of his body is actually struck. The sheer feat here is insane. In the anime, the blast reaches a distant celestial body in roughly 4 seconds, a speed calc that comes out to 5 million times faster than the speed of light. The fact that Cell had the reflexes to respond to something that fast while even off guard is an enormous statement about his superiority at this stage. When Cell turns his attention to Trunks in Grade 3 form, he makes a bold claim. Trunks' power even surpasses his own. At first glance, this sounds convincing, but the fight itself tells a very different story. Despite Trunks' overwhelming size and strength, Cell casually shrugs off his attacks, barely landing a scratch. Later, Korin outright clarifies that the fight showed Cell was still holding back and had yet to unleash his true strength. This lines up with Goku's own admission that Cell was already operating on a level far beyond the other Saiyans. In fact, multiple sources confirm what the narrative already implied. Cell was the strongest being in the universe at the time, which puts him above Grade 3 Trunks without question. It wasn't just a matter of speed either. Cell decisively outclassed Trunks in every aspect, and still, rather than ending his life, he chose to let him live, hoping the Saiyans would push themselves further, and they did. By the time Goku reemerges from the hyperbolic time chamber, he easily passes both Vegeta and Trunks Trunks while only using a fraction of his strength. And yet, even with this monumental increase, Goku openly admits he doesn't measure up to Cell. In fact, he declares that Cell's power eclipses anything he's ever witnessed, including himself and Gohan at their best. While the anime plays up this gap even more dramatically, the conclusion remains the same. Cell is just on another level. And that leads us into the Cell games. Starting with Goku's match. Goku quickly realizes the danger he's in. Even the smallest mistake would cost him everything, as Cell's power is far greater than anticipated. Here's where things get tricky. Because the anime and manga portray this fight differently, the anime repeatedly insists that Cell is fighting at full strength, with numerous lines and guidebook notes emphasizing it. Meanwhile, the manga presents a different picture. There, Goku suggests Cell is holding back, with the implication being that Cell saves his true power for the moment that he fights Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. The manga also makes it clear that the fight was never balanced, as it looked Goku was being pushed around the entire time. The anime adds even more flair by giving Cell a wider arsenal of techniques against Goku, like his modified multiform. Unlike the original version, his clones don't weaken it, which makes Tien's remark that Cell had perfected the move better than he ever did. In both versions, the fight escalates until Cell obliterates the tournament stage and the battle spills across the planet. This ultimately sets the stage for one of Goku's most famous tactics, the instant transmission Kamehameha, which blows away half of Cell's body in one devastating attack. The problem is that it barely slows him down. Cell regenerates instantly and continues fighting without missing a beat. This isn't just a display of regeneration, it ties into the broader point that Cell may have effectively infinite stamina. Several official sources, including the Dragon Book and Ultimate Battle Collection, outright describe his energy as inexhaustible or unlimited, which means no matter how much punishment he takes, Cell can keep going indefinitely, making him an opponent who can't be worn down through attrition. One of the lesser talked about but most important details from Daizenshuu 7 is that Cell inherited Android 17's infinite energy reactor. In other words, his stamina should be, by definition, limitless. Critics often point to moments where Cell is shown breathing heavily during his battle with Goku, but this doesn't actually contradict the statement. Just because he can show signs of strain doesn't mean his body runs out of energy. The more accurate way to look at it is while damage can physically weaken him, his energy reserves never truly run dry. He can instantly replenish himself by drawing on that reactor. So in essence, Cell can fight indefinitely unless you can destroy him outright. This becomes apparent during his duel with Goku. Cell is so confident in his superiority that he not only toys with him, but also allows Goku to eat his senzu bean. Keep in mind, Goku was already pushing himself to his limit and still couldn't close the gap. The fact that Cell felt safe enough to let him recover shows just how far ahead he really was. He even admits that a fully healed Goku would have only the smallest chance of victory, which tells you everything about the hierarchy at this point in the story. And that's where Goku makes the bold decision to bow out and put his faith in his son. He outright declares that Gohan has a hidden power surpassing both himself and Cell alone. To make things worse for Cell, Goku tosses him a senzu bean as well, which thanks to his Saiyan DNA in his body, likely made him even stronger than before. From here, the stage is set for Gohan to finally step in. When Gohan powers up to his full extent as a Super Saiyan, Cell immediately recognizes the difference between his father and his son. He even admits that Goku is right about Gohan being on another level, though he downplays by just how much. The problem, however, is that Gohan's hesitation holds him back. Rather than launching into battle with intent to kill, he spends most of his early exchange dodging and retreating. Cell uses this hesitation to briefly brutalize him, making it clear that even a maxed out Super Saiyan Gohan might not have been no match for this form. However, some will argue that Gohan's pacifism means he was nerfed, but it misses the point a bit. Even without fighting back, Gohan wasn't suddenly weaker, and Cell made sure to exploit that, tormenting him physically and psychologically to trigger the rage he wanted to see. Meanwhile, Goku explains to the others that Gohan's only path to victory is through an emotional explosion that would unlock new power. At this stage, even Goku didn't believe base Super Saiyan Gohan could possibly stand to Cell. There is one line in El Manga Legendario that describes Gohan as having obtained power beyond everyone else, but it is better understood as foreshadowing as his eventual leap into Super Saiyan 2. To close the debate once and for all, the official volume description calls it out. Cell was the strongest being in the universe up until the moment Gohan became a Super Saiyan 2. To draw out that transformation, Cell unleashed the Cell Juniors. What's often overlooked is the official guide states each of these miniature carried power equal to Cell himself. A terrifying concept considering there were 7 of them running rampant at one time. The Z Fighters are torn apart while Gohan watches helplessly, until his rage finally boils over. He breaks through his limits, first overwhelming Cell in base Super Saiyan state, then unleashing the transformation into Super Saiyan 2. From here, the dynamic flips completely. Gohan's newfound strength was so immense that his first real burst of power obliterated most of Cell's body. The sources suggest that this attack was at full power. Cornered, Cell makes a desperate attempt by bulking up into a grade 3 form, the mistake that Trunks had made before. But unlike Trunks, Gohan's agility doesn't suffer at all, and he effortlessly dismantles Cell's swollen frame, forcing him to regurgitate Android 18 and regress to a weaker state. Desperation drives Cell into his final gambit, preparing to self-destruct to take the Earth with him. This leads to one of the most iconic moments in the series, Goku's sacrifice. In a split-second decision, he teleports Cell to King Kai's planet, dying alongside him in the result explosion. When Goku's sacrifice seemed to end the nightmare, Cell revealed one last trick, his survival through a single cell nucleus. That tiny fragment allowed him to regenerate and return what was no longer the same perfect Cell we'd seen before. This new form, dubbed Super Perfect Cell, was described by the Daizenshuu as having undergone a massive jump in strength, vastly powering up like Son Gohan. That phrasing has has always sparked debate. Was it simply Cell saying he received a power-up in the same manner as Gohan, or that the scale of the transformation was actually comparable? The wording leans towards the latter. Cell himself seems to make the parallel directly, claiming his evolution mirrored Gohan's explosive increase when he ascended into Super Saiyan 2. If that's the intended meaning, then logically Super Perfect Cell should stand above Gohan, because Cell had already had the edge over Gohan's father and even Master Super Saiyan Gohan before this boost. Equal multipliers applied to both fighters would leave Cell ahead once again. Looking at some feats can reinforce this, with Cell unleashing a blast that is able to cut Gohan's ki in half. Additional sources also back up this newfound Cell superiority at this moment. The Dragon Book explicitly states that Super Perfect Cell's power was equal to, if not greater than, Gohan's. Daizenshuu 2 even lists Cell as the strongest being during that time, despite Super Saiyan 2 Gohan still existing in the same timeline. And the anime drives it home with Dende's commentary. He senses Cell's revived power and outright admits that Gohan may not be able to stop him, describing Cell as possessing strength greater than anything he'd ever felt before. Since Dende had already measured Gohan's full power in the earlier battle with Perfect Cell, this is a pretty ambiguous confirmation. Of course, one of the most common counterpoints is that Gohan ultimately killed Cell while heavily injured, using less than half of his strength. That's true, but it overlooks the fact that Gohan wasn't fighting alone in the final moment. Goku was still present, directly bolstering his son. Multiple guidebooks reference this, explaining that Goku was lending his energy to Gohan from the afterlife. Some people try to argue the term power here should be interpreted as moral support, but that doesn't line up with how Dragon Ball typically uses the word. In fact, the Super Exciting Guide clarifies that cheering for someone can literally provide them with Genki or usable energy. So whether you interpret Goku's help as direct ki transfer or spiritual amplification, the end result is the same. Gohan was boosted beyond what his broken body alone could produce. In short, Super Perfect Cell was not just a comeback, it was a transformation that put him on equal footing with and arguably above Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. Gohan's final victory required not just his own rage-fueled evolution, but also his father's unseen support. Without that combined effort, Cell's regeneration and overwhelming upgrade would have tipped the battle in his favor.